in decades. What are your thoughts on this?
I think they're right in thinking like that. I always believe the South China Sea, for example, is more dangerous than Taiwan Straits. Why? Because people thought, okay, there might be a war in Taiwan Strait, but the problem is, in Taiwan Strait, a war will not be triggered by the accident. You know, there are so many satellites watching, there are so many radars watching the situation. Even a few words made by President Biden have to be interpreted by himself and by his aide. So that means everybody is concerned with the issue. That means this issue actually may not explode so easily. But think of South China Sea. We have already have some accidents before, like the collision aircraft, like the very close encounter between ships. And the problem is, how can we resolve this issue? China talks about conflict building measures. President Biden talks about guardrails. Yeah, it's fine. Both sides have a joint wish not to have a conflict. But the question is how to avoid it. My question is also an answer. It's very simple. If you do not want the water to boil, why would you throw wood into the fire?
There are crisis control mechanisms in place. There are hotlines. There are agreed upon rules, and they don't work. And the reason they don't work is because the United States and China think of crisis control in very different ways. So from the American side, crisis control is something to be kept separate from the bilateral relationship. That is, whether bilateral relations are good or bad, there should always be robust crisis control. It's too important, even when relations are bad, not to make sure that isn't taken care of. From the Chinese point of view, however, crisis control is linked to bilateral relations. So from the Chinese point of view, if bilateral relations are bad, if China has a complaint about American policies, then crisis control should be one of the levers of pressure that the Chinese can use on the Americans. So we continue to have problems. When the United States uses the hotline and calls China, the Chinese don't pick up the phone.
If crisis control mechanisms don't work, then is conflict inevitable?
They want to be prepared for war, and they want to be seen to be strong. I don't think they actually really want to go to war. Xi Jinping is far more pragmatic. Etc. One case I always tell my students is, look what happened in 2019 when you had these protests in Hong Kong. There was a concern that they could easily send in the troops, and they were sort of like amassing troops in Shenzhen. But what was the final response? The Chinese leadership didn't send in the tanks. They didn't send in the military. They used sort of governance means. They set up sort of a national security law. They used legal means to sort of clamp down on that. And to me, that sort of seems to show that it's like it's not the actual use of force. It's like they're sending a deterrence message, but also finding ways to meet your objectives of actually going to war. This is sort of the raison d'etre of what the Xi Jinping regime is.
从双方这个国内的被疫情的都搞得焦头烂额吧，是吧？一大堆事情啊，这产业链啊、经济啊，双方都有各种问题，都应付不过来了。所以从根本上来讲，对吧？中美之间他们是不想开战的。那么这个是个大背景，在这样一个大背景之下，哪怕就是说演习威慑的程度很多，有各种惊险的这种场面出现，就像12月中美飞机在南海，这种基本上都属于表达。
目前上有经济的考虑，不过如果这种摩擦继续，那过了4-5年，我们会不会看到战争爆发呢
？4-5年以后，就要看哪一方有这种大的愿望，是吧？要看愿望，这个是确实不好说。
This May, traverse from the high octane of Asia's urbanisation to the calm realm of its natural wonder. Journalist Zhao Li rediscovers her roots in the world's K-pop capital and examines how the city continues to evolve.
There's this tension of old and new.
Deciphering South Korea, a rich and diverse world of outstanding wildlife in a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Singapore Botanic Gardens, like you've never seen it before. 1 year in the gardens. A world without elephants or turtles. Who are the trailblazing environmentalists making it their life's mission to save these species? The mass extinction. This May on CNA.
In June, Shanghai declared victory in its fight against COVID-19. But a harsh 2-month lockdown left the city scarred.
我要抛下我在上海的一切东西，我就无论如何我一定要离开。这个信任的确实是很受打击的。
How China's zero-COVID role model turned into a nightmare. Reliving the Great Shanghai Lockdown. Wednesday on CNA.
这边呢，用纸皮呢铺上去就可以休息。我们一个变虫了。
Everything must be clean food. No fresh food. Please come. You cannot sleep here. Where I want to sleep? Tell me.
Grass sleeping in Singapore is not against the law, but the thing here is
farming is a journey filled with surprising people.
This is chicken heaven.
Welcome home. Welcome home. We got altars, how did we?
People who taught me new lessons about growing food and sustainability.
มันเรื่องมันยาวนะเพราะว่าที่นี่สู้เรื่องเกี่ยวกับคนกับป่า
Lessons that will hopefully be passed down through generations.
So once you like know like everything that you cook, like you can like taste your money like.
Generations that will change the future of farming.
So what we're doing is reimagining how we can bring macro-urban farms back into the heart of everyone's life.
Join me, Chris Liao, on this journey of discovery. Watch a brand new season of Growing Wild on demand at cna.asia.
This is World Tonight.
Hello and good evening. I'm Paul Singh. Tonight's top stories: U.S. President Joe Biden looks to strengthen security ties with the Philippines as his counterpart Ferdinand Marcos Jr. visits the White House amid growing anxiety over China's assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific. Clashes erupt at May Day protests across France as anger mounts about pension reforms that raise the retirement age. May Day marked elsewhere around the world with rallies for higher salaries and better working conditions at a time of rising inflation. In the UK, critical healthcare is affected as nurses stage a new walkout. Russia launches its second pre-dawn attack on Ukrainian cities in 3 days, while an explosion that derailed a Russian freight train raises the specter of Ukrainian attacks in Russian territory. Regulators seize the assets of First Republic Bank, with JP Morgan set to acquire what's left, following the second largest bank failure in US history.
Good evening, I'm Ko King. Also tonight, the United Nations warns Sudan's humanitarian situation has reached breaking point as airstrikes continue to pound Khartoum despite an extended truce. And what's it like to flee Sudan as violence erupts in the capital? We get an account from a teacher at the Khartoum International Community School who managed to evacuate amid the fighting.
Defense and economic cooperation high on the agenda as Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and President Joe Biden meet in Washington. The two leaders will hold talks in the White House as they seek to